The movie begins with a young man named Kaiji Ito, whose life is very simple. He only works as a shopkeeper whose salary is only enough for daily meals. Because of his very simple life, it is not uncommon for him to feel jealous and annoyed at the lives of other people who are luckier than him. Until then, he even vented his frustration by kicking a car until it was dented. Unfortunately, the owner of the car turned out to be a loan shark, so he used the damage to the car to get compensation from Kaiji for 10 million yen. As we know, of course, a Kaiji could not have that much money. As a result, the loan shark also suggested to Kaiji to take part in a gambling on the Espoir ship so that he could pay off his debt. In that situation, Kaiji had no other choice but to take part in the gambling. Long story short, Kaiji finally arrived at an Espoir ship. Unexpectedly on the ship, there were so many people who also had the same fate as him. After that, a man named Tonegawa came out, who was the organizer of the gambling. There, Tonegawa also explained the rules of the gambling they would play, where each player will be equipped with 3 chips and 12 cards containing scissors, stones, and paper. Well, simply the player's job here is just to play a game of scissors, stones, paper with each other. And if the player loses, then he must give up 1 chip to the winning player. The game time will last for 30 minutes only, where in that time, each player must spend all the cards he has and leave at least 3 chips to win. But those who fail to meet these conditions will automatically become slaves. Once the game starts, the situation becomes very chaotic, because all players do not want to run out of their time. It made them play gambling without any strategy, which made one by one among them began to run out of chips and was taken to the dark room. Seeing that Kaiji began to be careful and thought about his strategy carefully in order to win the game, that's when he also met someone named Funai, who offered cooperation with him. So here, Funai has a strategy so that he and Kaiji can be free together, where he asks Kaiji to issue the same card in each game, so that they both finish the card and their chips will also remain safe. At first, the game was going very well, and according to their expectations, until suddenly Kaiji's innocence was taken advantage of by Funai. Funai betrayed Kaiji and won 2 of his chips. In that situation, Funai also had 5 chips and 1 card, while Kaiji had 1 chip and also 1 card. The betrayal certainly made Kaiji very angry, so he immediately beat Funai until Funai was injured. After that, Kaiji and Funai were separated by the guards so that they did not make a scene again. On the other hand, a man named Ishida was seen, who was frightened because he could not play the game. Seeing that Kaiji also approached Ishida and offered him to cooperate, because Funai and Kaiji both knew the rest of each other's cards. Funai also offered to all players to shuffle their cards. But here, Funai again cheated by giving Kaiji a scissor card that had traces of blood on it. He knew that he could beat Kaiji, but what he didn't know was that Kaiji wasn't that stupid. Kaiji secretly swapped his card with Ishida's paper card and even smeared a little blood on the paper card so that Funai wouldn't know that the card had been swapped. As a result, after the randomization, Funai arrogantly challenged Kaiji to play even with a bet of 3 chips at once. So here Funai targeted Kaiji, as well as Ishida, to become a slave. But in fact, in the game, Kaiji actually managed to beat Funai and won 3 chips at once. So here, both Kaiji and Ishida finally both have 3 chips. Their task now is to play together to spend Ishida's cards. Just when the game is over, they manage to finish all the cards. Both of them are very happy because soon they will be free from debt. But unexpectedly, Ishida found 1 card left in his pocket. As a result, he could not fulfill the requirements to win the game and ended up becoming a slave. While Kaiji felt very guilty to Ishida, so he also decided to become a slave with him. 1 month passed since the gambling. Kaiji, Ishida, and several other people were forced to work for a construction underground. With very heavy work and very poor food and drink. But these slaves also could not escape because in each of their arms had been embedded with a chip. So the Tonegawa could still monitor all their movements. That day, Kaiji and the others got their salaries for their hard work during this month. Seeing his salary was very little, Kaiji was then angry, but the foreman explained that his salary had been deducted for his living accommodations while here. As a result, Kaiji could only accept this fact. On payday, an officer usually came to sell food and drinks to the slaves. The slaves did not want to waste the opportunity to be delicious. So they immediately spent their salary to shop there. While Kaiji initially chose to restrain himself so that he could save his salary to pay his debts and be free from the place. But when the foreman came and tempted him to buy, Kaiji melted and immediately spent his salary to eat well. The system was actually deliberately done so that the slaves would never be able to pay their debts, and eventually they would remain slaves forever. A few days later, the project that the workers were working on suddenly experienced technical problems, which caused several workers to be injured due to the collapse. One of the victims of the collapse was Ishida. Seeing that Kaiji helped Ishida and took him to the examination center, but unexpectedly, in the examination room, they had to pay to be able to get treatment from a doctor. As a result, only a few workers could get treatment from so many injured workers. This cruel system was again used by officials to make the slaves even more miserable. One of the slaves named Sahara said that she overheard the foreman's conversation about this system, the effect of which would make the slaves stuck there until death. Hearing that conversation, the doctor also proposed a way out, namely the Bridge of Freedom. It was the only option for slaves who were desperate to get out of the place. 1 month later, precisely on payday, Sahara volunteered to become a participant in the Bridge of Freedom. In addition to Sahara, Kaiji, Ishida, several other people also volunteered. The next day, some of the participants were taken to a rooftop. There, Tonegawa explained the rules of the Bridge of Freedom game, where at the beginning of the game, each player will be provided with a money voucher of 10 million yen, and the voucher will be redeemed after they successfully cross the bridge to the next building. Simply here, they have to walk on a small bridge as high as the building to get to the next building. And of course, those who fail will later fall and die. They are also not allowed to crawl, because the bridge has been given electricity. So anyone who holds it will be immediately electrocuted and die immediately. So the game is nothing but a game between life and death. The tense game was even witnessed by rich people. and only served as entertainment for them. There was also seen the moneylender who sent Kaiji to gambling at the beginning of the previous movie. Unexpectedly, the moneylender turned out to be one of the subordinates of Tonegawa. The short story of the game finally began. Before starting to cross the bridge, Kaiji also got the idea to make a straight line in the shoes of each player. It was done so that the players could walk straight. After that, the players, one by one, began to cross the bridge. Here they were required to stay focused and maintain balance. But it was seen that most of the players were very scared, which made them unfocused. As a result, one by one of them began to fall. Those who were still surviving were required not to panic even though many of their friends had fallen. But in the middle of the bridge, the pressure faced was getting stronger, because at that time the wind suddenly blew strongly and the rain fell. Now only Kaiji, Sahara, and Ishida were left on the bridge. At that time, Ishida also told Kaiji that she felt that she could no longer continue the game, so she handed over her voucher to Kaiji, so that later, if Kaiji won, then the money from her voucher could be given to her daughter. Hearing this, Kaiji felt very sad, because it meant that his best friend would choose to die. And sure enough, after that, Ishida fell without the slightest sound, because he did not want Kaiji to lose concentration when he fell. As a result, when Kaiji turned around, Ishida was no longer behind him. At that time, Kaiji felt very devastated and almost gave up, but he remembered his promise to Ishida to win the game. As a result of his strong determination, he managed to cross the bridge together with Sahara. Now Kaiji and Sahara only have to enter the building and exchange their vouchers for cash. Unexpectedly, as soon as Sahara opened the door, the wind suddenly blew so strongly that Sahara finally fell. Fortunately, at that time, Kaiji was still able to hold on and managed to get inside. Inside, Kaiji was greeted by the chairman along with Tonegawa and some of his men. Without further ado, Kaiji immediately exchanged his voucher along with Ishida's voucher. Unexpectedly, Tonegawa also said that Ishida's voucher could not be exchanged. It certainly made Kaiji very angry considering he had promised Ishida before. Even the money earned by Kaiji from the voucher will also be reduced by all his debts. The chairman, who was interested in Kaiji, then gave him the opportunity to gamble once again. Different from other gambling, in gambling this time, Kaiji must face Tonegawa, the king of gambling. Therefore, if Kaiji wins, then he will get 10 times the bet. The gambling they will play this time is card gambling, where each player will get 5 cards. Of the 5 cards, there are people's cards, slave cards, and king cards. Now each player will get 4 people's cards, and 1 of the slave cards or king cards. So the slave card can be defeated by the people's card, while the people's card can be defeated by the king card, and the king card can only be defeated by the slave card. At this time, Gambling Kaiji also chose 4 people's cards and 1 slave card, while Tonegawa will use 4 people's cards and 1 king card. Here, actually, Kaiji takes a big risk because the possibility of winning is smaller than Tonegawa. At this time, they will only play 3 rounds, and the game finally begins. In the first round, at the beginning of the game, Kaiji and Tonegawa's cards are still balanced with each other. But in the end, Tonegawa won the first round because Kaiji was too predictable. Well, because Kaiji had run out of money, so the chairman also lent him some money to see the gambling in the second round. But this time, if he lost, then he would become a slave for the rest of his life. And the second round finally began. In the second round this time, it turned out that Tonegawa won the gambling again. As a result, Kaiji had to accept the fact that he would return to being a slave forever. Then on the way, Kaiji also realized that in the previous gambling, Tonegawa had cheated, where Tonegawa could actually see all the cards from Kaiji through his watch. As a result, Kaiji decided to borrow money from the loan shark for 50 million to challenge Tonegawa again. At first, the loan shark refused the request, but after hearing the determination and cruel plan, he agreed and gave the loan. There, the moneylender also introduced himself to Kaiji by the name of Rika Endo. Finally, Kaiji returned to the gambling arena and brought a check for 50 million for his bet this time. Before the match, Kaiji deliberately hit his head until it bled, so that the two cards on the table were splashed from his blood. Here it seems that Kaiji will use the same tactics that he used to defeat Funai before. In this round, Tonegawa looks quite anxious because he can no longer see Kaiji's card. And if he loses, then his reputation in front of the chairman will be destroyed instantly. At the beginning of the round, the two continued to draw with each other. In the middle of the match, Tonegawa realized Kaiji's plan, which was exactly the same as what was done in the previous gambling, so he felt a little calm and even confident that he would win. But the results turned out to be much different, where Kaiji finally managed to win the gambling because Tonegawa issued a king card while he issued his slave card. It turns out that everything Kaiji did from the beginning was just to trick Tonegawa so that he could be defeated. As a result, Kaiji won the gambling and got 500 million yen, while Tonegawa, who lost, was finally punished by the chairman and ended up becoming a slave. After that, Kaiji was finally freed from slave status and prepared to live his normal life. The prize of 500 million yen was also given half of it to Endo as a token of thanks. As a celebration, the two decided to eat together at a restaurant. But unfortunately, there it turned out that Endo had deceived him and gave sleeping pills to Kaiji's drink. And after Kaiji fell asleep, Endo also took away all of Kaiji's money and only left a little for him. After waking up, Kaiji only gets a letter from Endo saying that Kaiji's money now belongs to Endo to pay all of Kaiji's debts from the beginning of their meeting, plus the interest on the money loan that increases every minute. So Kaiji only gets a little money from his winnings. The movie ends with Kaiji sending his money to his daughter Ishida, according to his promise to his late friend, and the movie ends.